Hi, everyone. This is Trust in the Process with Travis Fritz. Today, I have Aaron Rzeznik, who will be talking about his brewery in Wixom, Michigan, Drafting Table, and a lot about his sort of entry into brewing and the changes that he's experienced in his own brewing career and some of the changes we've all experienced over the last couple of years. This podcast is brewers talking to brewers about brewing generally and other topics that I find appealing. We're not necessarily a marketing podcast. We are really just trying to dig into the thought process that goes into brewing and the process of work generally that brewers experience and some of the difficulties and ways that they've sort of met those difficulties along the way. So Aaron, Drafting Table is in Wixom, Michigan. Will you describe to folks who are not from Southeast Michigan where Wixom is and where you are in Wixom, how they can find you?
Sure. Yeah. Generally, I tell people Metro Detroit, give them a broad sense of where we're at. But yeah, more specifically by Novi, which is a larger city around us. If you're taking 96 towards Detroit, we're 2 miles north on the Wixom Road exit. So exit 159. Yep.
Cool. Sort of the outer northwest suburbs of Detroit.
Exactly. Yep.
Or really west suburbs of Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so now I take that exit because I want to go to Drafting Table. I'm going to go downtown. Are you outside of town?
We're just in the downtown, what's called the VCA Village Center area of Wixom. I know, fancy, right? Yeah, just on the western edge of it. So you would take Wixom Road 2 miles north, take a left on Old Wixom, and basically that road terminates in our parking lot. So
Killer. Yeah. So I've been there once. It's beautiful inside. I didn't ask this when I was there, like a jerk, I guess. But your wife you started kind of your professional career as a landscape architect. Is that right? Or engineer?
Yep.
Okay. And she was an interior designer. That's probably a better name.
Yep.
Okay. And she's responsible for how beautiful the inside of that pub looks generally? I mean,
absolutely. Yep. She asked my opinion on a lot of things.
Well, that's friendly.
Nice, I think.
Right. That's nice. And so the pub itself is beer focused because it sounds like because you're in sort of downtownish VCA of Wixom, you don't cook food in house, but that's purposeful, right? You're supporting kind of restaurants around you.
Yes. Yeah. We chose this location because it's in a building with 4 other restaurants.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to Drafting Table. I want some food. I call ahead, order from one of the restaurants, bring it into Drafting Table. I can eat it there, drink beer, hang out, have fun.
Yep. And we occasionally bring food trucks in too to mix it up.
Okay, cool. Good. So one of the things I think is interesting, and I don't, because I haven't, been there that much. I don't know how it operates now, but I know that when I went there, and this was a couple of years ago, you all had a Stammtisch. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay. And will you explain to folks what a Stammtisch is?
Well, Stammtisch is, and you can correct me if my understanding of it's wrong. But yeah, usually a table set aside for the regulars or, the mayor, the city dignitaries. I don't know. But yeah, it generally is a table set aside for I guess the special people. Whatever.
And is that how I've noticed in the U.S., and honestly, in a lot of Bierstuben, even in northern Germany and sometimes in the south of Germany as well, the Stammtisch will really just be kind of like if you sit down there, you can expect other people. I mean, essentially, if you go into the bar alone just to find people to hang out with, it's less so obviously in beer gardens in southern Germany. That's just kind of every table.
Right.
But like I said, the Bierstuben, it really is just a table. If you're going in there just by yourself and you just want some company, you can expect people just like you to sit down at that table in that place as well. And it's a great place to get in conversation and meet new people and obviously have a couple of delicious beers. So I don't know if that's what your Stammtisch ends up being sometimes or not, but
Yeah, it's and obviously we don't reserve it for the the dignitaries of the city, but yeah, it's just a big gathering table. Yeah, exactly like you mentioned. So,
right. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, I think that's healthy for the community. You know what I mean? It's good to have a place to come and sit if you want some company, you know?
Yeah.
So you spent some time banging around Germany or Europe generally, yeah?
Yeah. So I actually spent a chunk of my childhood just in a suburb of Munich.
Okay.
Kirchheim bei München, which is in between Erding and Munich.
Okay.
And I was there from like 2 to 6, and got immersed in the culture a little bit. Used to speak German more fluently than English.
Yeah.
And then I went back a couple more times when I could actually enjoy the libations there and really got into beer at that point. Yep.
And where were you hanging around the second time when you were old enough to?
So I went back to my old stomping grounds. So Kirchheim and in Eiting. We had friends in Eiting, which is right outside Erding, and that was 14. So I was drinking some beer at 14. But in Germany, as you know, that's it's not.
Well, it depends on what you look like, right? If you look like you're 16, you're pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, if they give you bread, they'll give you beer. That's pretty much what I found.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that were you? I mean, obviously at 14, you're not necessarily aware that you're, what you're going to be when you grow up, right?
Right.
But having had that experience of drinking legally. I was an exchange student in high school in Munich as well for a while. And my experience of it was such an important thing to be welcomed into a community that involved alcohol in a legal, more structured fashion than we do here.
Yep.
And I'm certainly not advocating for young people to drink, right? But I think that it's important if you have a culture that involves drinking, which American culture does, to have a sort of pathway to learn how to do it in a way that is at least socially responsible, right?
Correct. Yes.
So if that resonates with you, what was your perspective then on the German drinking culture from the perspective of a teenager who was probably feeling like he was getting away with something a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. I felt guilty, I guess.
Me too. Me too.
But it was cool. Yeah. It was just, hanging out with my mom, having a beer in the beer garden at 14. It was like you said, it's, or like we said, it's, you feel guilty and, like you're getting away with something.
Yeah. Right. Well, like you kind of should be drinking like this. And I mean, I remember my host sister, who I was 16 and she was 19, and she would always try and get me to go out with her and her friends in Munich, which of course I did and wanted to do. And that always involved a beer or whatever. And I remember the first couple of weeks, man, I just wouldn't get one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I knew I was going to go back home and start up, I think it was the end of football season. So maybe wrestling when I got back. And I was just like, well, I can't pollute my body like that with some beer. And which, of course, I'm not that worried about now. But, I think that when I finally had one, I remember this feeling of like, I'm sure that everyone sitting around me is looking at me drink this beer and judging me. You know what I mean? Like though I was back in the United States, like somebody stop that kid. And that wasn't the case at all, and it was completely normal. And I think the idea of being introduced into a drinking culture out in the open is really, really important and changes the way. Of course, there are alcoholics in Germany like there are anywhere else.
Sure.
But I do think it changes the way you approach alcohol initially, which informs the way that you approach it later in life, right?
Absolutely.
But it is not that much different than drinking a Coca-Cola, right?
Yep.
And there aren't, any nights or days when I am, after 5, 6, 7, or 8 Coca-Colas. And it's the same thing with beer, you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's difficult to put. I didn't prepare that, by the way. You can probably tell, but I don't know, man. I just think that drinking culture is so important, and I wonder if you think that having had that experience, that kind of formative experience with that kind of beer, influenced the kind of beer that, as a brewer now, you enjoy drinking. And if so, do you also enjoy making it? And tell us why, if so.
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. It formed, or it's kind of shaped what I enjoy today. Yeah. So naturally, which is Hellas, pills, what the beers that are common over there.
Weizenbier export.
Yep. Yeah. And actually, I remember my first pills when I was 14, Eitinger pills.
Right.
Yeah, I can still remember sipping on it and how good it was. That's what I drink. I'd say 90% of the time over here. And yes, absolutely, we love brewing them. They're a big part of our sales here at the pub, which is cool to see. That, as you know, they do take longer. The lagers, but
worth it.
Boy, are they worth it.
Yeah, they are. So maybe we can kind of dovetail that into a discussion about what you say, lagers, or at least should we say traditional continental and British beers, it seems like, are a big part. I see that they're a big part of your tap lineup.
Yes.
Is this something that the first question would be, is this something that you've been doing since you opened the doors, or is this a little bit of a curve in direction for you?
No, it was always our plan to have at least a pills on tap, right. German style pills. And I want to say it came around maybe batch number 6.
Okay. Okay. So right away.
Yeah. We kicked out some quick turnover beers, IPA, whatever, to get them on, get a tap list going. And then, we quickly jumped into a lager.
Cool.
With the intention of keeping one on. So at least.
And how many times, I know that you have great clientele and I'm not asking you to sell them out. I'm making a joke based on experiences I have had. Right.
Okay.
So do you remember the first time somebody came into your pub and was like, why are you making a Pilsner? Pilsners are stupid, right? Where's your cupcake Imperial Stout?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. That's, it still happens,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And tell me, I'll go first if you want me to, but tell me what goes on in your mind when someone says that to you at your own fucking brewery.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. We brew some stuff. I'm not gonna say cupcake, whatever.
Right.
But we've done some highly adjuncted beers. We try to keep a good variety on tap. To appease a lot of people. But yeah, it's hard to kind of when somebody says that to you. It's hard to take it.
It is. It's weird.
I bite my tongue essentially. You kind of have to.
Yeah, you do. You maybe get a little stinger.
Yeah, true.
But I think, it happens to me all the time. It's happened throughout my career. It's happened. I can't tell you how many times, right? I spent 10 years, that's 7 years, just making an alt beer, a Radler, a lager, and then a chocolate stout, which is the cupcake shit that I'm talking about. But that was for Sanders, right? Which is a big deal in Detroit.
Oh yeah.
And just, vagabonding from brewery to brewery and just trying to make as much as I could and keep the supply lines open for the distributors that I was working with while working and at that brewery as a kind of a contracted employee at different breweries. And it was rough. And I can't tell you how many times, we're starting a family. People were like, when I say people, I mean the people that would sell my beer were like, dude, a Pilsner, like for real? You know what I mean? Like, though this is good and you won GABF medals and World Beer Cups and stuff with beer, but nobody's going to buy this shit. You're an idiot, right? Why don't you just make Two Hearted? Right? And the answer is because Bell's makes Two Hearted and it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why would I do that? And also, this, and it was wrongheaded, right? But this idea, well, not necessarily wrongheaded, but I just did it in the wrong order. This idea of, this shit is important, right? It's important that people, and I say people, I mean brewers, it's important that people remember why this beer is important, this kind of beer is important, right?
Right.
And why it's part of the social fabric in so many, places that are influenced by Northern Europe and even places that aren't, right?
Yep.
Japan has some of the best Pilsners I've ever had, right? China now is also having good Pilsner, and the African market is wide open for that kind of brewing as well.
Yep.
Look, and I'm not saying it's the preeminent style of beer. I'm not saying it's the most important. I'm just saying there's so much locked up in that style of brewing that is important about brewing. And I've been terrified, to be honest with you, and we mean, call me Chicken Little or whatever, but I've been terrified for the last 15 years at, the path that American craft beer has taken away from that kind of stuff. And what it's clear to me that brewers are forgetting, and what folks that drink the beer are forgetting about what I at least think beer is. I wonder if that resonates to you.
Absolutely. And more on that, I guess it's really exciting to see the change in beer, tastes that we've been seeing, I'd say, in the last year.
Yeah.
And the lagers are gaining traction. It's really cool. And I had mentioned it's our best seller in our pub.
What is the name of that particular beer?
Professional Pills.
Pro Pills. Yep,
for short. Yeah, it's killing it for us. So we're really excited to see that. And yeah, it does take longer to brew. Fortunately, we've set up our brewery to accommodate that better, as best as we can be in a small brewery. But
well, you're working on a 7-barrel system, yeah?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about your fermenter, briefly about your fermenter orientation?
Sure. So we have 4 7s. We have 2 15s and then a 20.
Okay.
Or 21. And that 21 barrel is dedicated to Pro Pills. So 3 turns into that. Yep. And then because we're short on space, we have a 20 barrel bright that's essentially a vertical lagering tank.
Sure.
That the pills will move into after fermentation, and then into a bright after that. So,
right on. For what it's worth, I have never made one of my own lagers in a horizontal lagering tank. So, I mean, I get it. Why, people like it. I understand the theory, but I don't think it matters that much.
It works.
And
Pills is nice and bright. So
right. And horizontal tanks are such a pain in the ass to clean.
I've never cleaned one, but I can only imagine. Yeah.
Count your blessings. They suck.
Yep.
Yeah. So okay. So you're participating in carrying the torch of tradition for brewing in part, which I think is important. I think every brewer should do that.
Yeah.
Not to pay respect or anything, but just to keep your chops up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to put yourself out there with a lager means you truly are putting your skill out there, right?
Right.
Not your imagination, not your whimsy, right? None of that shit. Not you're chasing something somebody else did necessarily, even though that kind of is what it is. But you're putting your ability to do something patiently, methodically, and accurately on display. And if nothing else, wouldn't it be great if craft beer consumers really understood that about that kind of beer?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, it's like going on stage with a sock and nothing else on. You know what I mean? It's like, here I am. This is as good as I can do. You know?
Yep, absolutely.
So the last couple of years, we talked a lot today about your pub already.
Yep.
Last couple of years have been rough on pubs.
I've never experienced that kind of none of us have. But that kind of stress, yeah. Especially, we were just starting at the point when COVID hit, to get in a comfortable groove. We were we're just about to celebrate our 4th anniversary, so things were really clicking, and then COVID hit. Yep.
Shit.
So just like everybody else, you had to pivot and figure it out. And
so give me a little bit, I mean, maybe put it on a timeline for us, right? March 2020.
Yep.
Everybody says, oh shit.
Yep. So we're getting ready for our big anniversary party, end of March. And we're watching things unfold and overseas and getting a little nervous. And then it hit. And you freak out. It's you start doing cash flow projections, and it's like, all right, how long can we last here? This is before PPP, and it was pretty stressful. So fortunate for us, we were able to pivot into packaged product. We had bought a canning line about 9 months prior to COVID hitting.
What kind of canning line is that? Is that multiple head or?
Just a 2-head wild goose. So we can do about a case a minute. So, yep,
that's good.
Yep, for a 7-barrel system, it's perfect size.
Exactly.
We just threw everything into that. Fortunately, I had a solid can supplier. So,
who you working with for can supply, Land and Sea or
Land and Sea? Correct. Yep.
Yeah, they're great, man. Yep. Tim and Kim are saints.
They're fantastic. So they helped us through it for sure, by keeping a steady supply of aluminum. So
us too, honestly. So, all right. So, like me and other people, I'm putting words in your mouth here a little bit, but March, April, you just kind of shitting your pants, putting your fists up and seeing what you got to block and what you got to throw. PPP comes out. We don't talk about you did or you didn't, right? But that happened.
Right.
And then the summer comes. And for us, I know that summer particularly was this weird, inertia. There wasn't anything happening, and zero people knew what was going to happen. And, there are questions about the validity of this and the importance of that and all this kind of stuff. The brewers, I would assume, like me, and I would assume yourself, were just kind of going, okay, well, people are sitting at home. You already talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to talk about the nature of it. People are sitting at home, right? They are clearly, I mean, this is what I saw. We're looking at IRI data and other inventory management data that our distributors use, that we have access to. And, essentially we're seeing that people are sitting at home, but people seem to be sitting at home and drinking beer, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is an opportunity that we were, like you, able to capitalize on. And I wonder, I mean, I guess the question I want to ask is the question I'm thinking of is, what did that feel like? And I do want to ask that question, but I also want to ask you kind of, what did that look like in terms of what beers you were putting on the market, what folks were drinking? Was that different than what you were experiencing in your pub? And if so, how?
So, it was a little overwhelming because we try to keep up. Again, I mentioned before, we try to keep a wide variety on tap, and we try to I think we did a pretty good job continuing that with our packaged product. And as you know, that means a lot of label development. So there was, it was exhausting, putting a lot of effort into that, and trying to, stay ahead of it.
When you say stay ahead of it, what do you mean? Stay ahead of it?
Getting it approved. Just the artwork takes forever too. Going back and forth. We try to. I don't know. Sometimes we would just throw some font on there for in a pinch or something. Get the label sent out, get it approved at our our label supplier quickly. But it was a ton of work. Not just packaging, but just getting all that put together.
Right. Well, and the timing of it all, right? Because you have to make promises, right? Your distributor wants a promise. What day exactly? Right?
Yep. And then lead times were, especially with the label manufacturer, just going up and up because everyone was doing the same thing. So,
Well, we had, we pretty much stuck to our guns in terms of what we were selling. And that's the nature of this brewery anyway.
Yep.
But I think it developed and became strengthened throughout the pandemic because, look, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If people are buying M43, then let's make some M43 and sell it, right? But at the same time, there was an urge, at least for me, to kind of you start rolling the dice a little bit again. And for me, what that means is it is any day of the week, we could make another New England IPA that is slightly different than the other New England IPAs that we make and put a crazy name on it and sell, 10,000, 12,000 cases of it. No problem. Sure. Right? I mean, like that. And so risk to me is different now than it used to be. And I think consumers are maybe catching up to that. And that's part of the lager, the change that's happening as well. But what I think consumers are used to is risk taking is, putting kumquats in your barley wine. You know what I mean? To me, that doesn't feel risky anymore. That's a slam dunk. People are going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right. I think the risk is in making a mild ale, for example, or an alt beer or whatever. Right. Yeah. And explaining why it's good to people. Right. You have to think about it a little harder at first, maybe, but once you get it, this is what we talked about in the beginning, you having gone to Germany, once you get it, you get it, right? That's beer then, right? That's the beer you want when you think about wanting a beer.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, you work with M4 in distribution. I think
yes, Yep.
Okay. And M4 is famous for, one of the things they're famous for is having a broad portfolio of really experimental breweries, right?
Yes.
So how do you feel like you fit into that portfolio, and how do they then approach beers like the professional pills that you make?
Yeah, they honestly take every drop of pills that we can get them, which in the grand scheme of things is not, that much. But the cool thing is we kind of occupy a chunk of their portfolio that is, the more traditional side of things, which I'm quite proud of. And again, that's not to say we don't, send them stuff like we have a milkshake IPA with orange in it called Orange Bruleus. That's one of the bigger, I guess one of the beers we send the most of to them. But the pills, we have kind of a traditional sort of American IPA that does really well. It's pretty cool to be that part of the, that chunk of their portfolio.
So we work with some boutique distributors, but most of those are in outer markets that we don't really pay, to be frank, a lot of attention to. Mm-hmm. That is to say, we should pay more attention than we do, right? Mostly, though, we're working with pretty big distributors. And the difference between working with a big distributor, like, let's say, Heidelberg in Ohio, which is like, I think the 10th or 11th biggest distributor in the United States. The difference between working with those guys and working with, let's say, Heartland, which is kind of a smaller distributor that we work with in Chicago, is night and day. It's completely different. Getting their attention, keeping their attention, messaging, making sure the messaging is heard, making sure the reps have a story to tell, all that kind of stuff is really, really difficult, right? Generate with bigger distributors. And with smaller distributors, not only do you tend to know all the reps and probably have conversations with the owner or CEO a fair amount, but they have more bandwidth, because even if they do have a large portfolio, there's stuff that they know works and they know doesn't work within that portfolio. And if you're one of the ones that works, they've got the bandwidth to kind of hear you and then go out and repeat what it is that you're telling them. So yep. M4 strikes me as a distributor that is a lot more sensitive and willing to kind of wanting to sort of hear your story about a beer and then go tell it when they're outselling the beer. When Drafting Table started distributing, was that you worked at Witcher's Hat for a little while before Drafting Table? Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yep. And they were distributing at that time?
Yes, they were. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Did
you have anything really to do with distribution then, or were you pretty much just on the deck making beer?
I was pretty much on the deck making beer. Yeah.
Okay. So, moving into distribution with Drafting Table, focusing on distribution in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty, meaning the pandemic, what was your experience with that? Right. I know for me, the longing of just wanting to sell beer out of the tap room is strong when you're having problems with distributors. So what was that like with you?
Yeah, I guess to rewind a bit. Yeah. So when we first opened, my goal was to distribute beer, within 6 to 8 months of opening. Okay. Once we had things kind of dialed in. And my goal was always to self-distribute.
Okay.
And I quickly realized how fun that was.
Yeah.
No sarcasm there, but yeah, I hated it. Absolutely hated it.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. And so fortunately, they were put in touch with M4. We also looked at a couple other distributors, and after the meetings, quickly realized that that they were a match for us.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Good. Yeah. Well, and I guess what I'm talking about a little bit more is not necessarily what your relationship with M4 specifically is like at this point, but more here's a poorly kept secret in the brewing industry that essentially when you're selling a beer out of your pub, you are setting the market price, right?
Yep.
So your margin selling a 4-pack out of the pub is drastically increased in relative to what you make when you sell it to the distributor, because essentially you're selling it to the distributor and you have to kind of back end their margin and the retailer's margin. So a case that just random numbers, a case that you might make $50 on in your pub, you're going to sell that to the distributor for like $22, right?
Yeah.
Which helps volume. I mean, this is the situation we all signed up for. I'm not complaining about that situation, but I think it's something that folks who aren't distributing brewers don't really think about, right?
Yep.
This is why brewers love pub releases. One of the reasons. And so that, in the context of the pandemic, this is really what I'm getting at. In the context of the pandemic, where you may be reticent to invite people into your pub to pick up beer, shifting then towards, I'm talking about stuff that we did too, if this doesn't make sense to you.
Yep.
Shifting toward distribution and understanding that does a lot to your bottom line overall. Not only do you not have butts and seats in your pub, buying pints at whatever amount you set, that margin is generally great, but you're also losing margin that you kind of count on to run your business by selling beer to the distributor. And again, I'm not impugning distributors here, but your volume is ostensibly up, right? So you're working, it maybe feels like you're working a little bit harder for less money. What was your experience like there?
The cool thing is we had a really good curbside presence, and I'd say volume wise, probably the same as 2019, but again, a lot of it packaged. No pints were being sold for a chunk of that time. any draft was growler in growler format.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely. I felt like I was working a lot harder because we were packaged pretty much everything.
Right.
And again, on a 2-head filler,
Right.
and we actually didn't even have a labeler up until May of 2020 when we realized
hand labeling.
We had the foot pedal,
Right.
whatever. Yeah, it was fun.
Right.
But so we quickly realized, this is not a 2 to 4 week shutdown. This is going to be a long-term thing. So we fortunately bought an inline labeler, and that was a game changer.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
But yeah, it definitely felt like a lot more work for less.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder when you're I mean, this is nothing anyone planned for, right?
Mm-hmm.
My feeling, and I know the feeling of a lot of brewers that I've spoken to about the last couple of years, and I think we'll probably move on from the pandemic after this, but what's most frustrating is everybody's got their story about how they worked harder and pulled together, and the team pulled together, and they made it through, which are all inspiring, frankly. But also there seems to be a sentiment of loss, right? Not financial loss, but that you maybe feel like you kind of lost a year or a year and a half, right, in terms of the progress of everything to do with your business, right? Not maybe you're winning new customers, but you can't meet them, and maybe you're used to knowing who's drinking your beer, or maybe like us, you just kind of stopped experimenting. You just kind of went back to your core and focused on pushing that. Lessons learned there for sure. But when you look to the future, what are your goals for Drafting Table in the next, let's say, 3 years?
Yeah, we're at an interesting point because we're completely maxed out of space. So I guess to I don't know, to put it one way, is that we're doing a little soul searching to decide what our next step is.
Okay.
And we're kind of maxed out end of 2019, but we were starting that process, and that's right when COVID hit. So now that we're just getting through that, we're starting to feel settled again. I guess more normal. And we're starting that soul searching process.
Yeah, I think that's right. And for me, what that always has been is assessing my risk tolerance at that moment. Right.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yep. Especially being, we're still exhausted from last 2 years, and it's intimidating. So
yeah, it is intimidating, right? Like, how hard do I push this? How much risk do I take in order, particularly when you're maxed out, right? Because then you're kind of, this is not the fanciful, thoughts of someone just saying like, wouldn't it be cool if, right?
Yeah.
You're going, okay, man, we got to make some decisions here. You know what I mean? Right. And that's, it's always preferable when those aren't kind of forced on you, but for good reason, right? I mean, you're selling as much as the space you're in fits. That's good.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So I think when we talk about the craft beer industry here in Michigan, it's not all that different, I don't think, than craft beer cultures and industries elsewhere. But one of the things that we have here in Michigan is the Brewers Guild, which has changed in terms of, I've been around brewing in Michigan for 20 years now. Mm-hmm. And it's changed in terms of what the Brewers Guild is to brewers, I think. But I think that has less to do with the guild and more to do with the fact that when I came into Michigan, I think there were like 57 breweries.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And most of them were, whatever, a barrel or two, and hardly any of them are around anymore. To now where there are, I don't even know how many, 300 and some. Is that still?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe close to 400.
Right. And most of them are little, right?
Yep.
And when I say little, I mean like kind of 3 barrels and under, right?
Yep.
Just open up in an old flower shop and, put 10 square feet of brewing equipment in there and you're done, right? Which is valid and totally cool. But what I see happening in our Brewers Guild and in the craft beer culture in Michigan is this really huge dichotomy between the needs and wants of brewers that size who maybe haven't been brewers for long, generally
Sure.
haven't been brewers for long, and brewers that approach a larger size like maybe Old Nation does.
Right.
It's not even the same sport then, at all. It's the difference between swimming and volleyball, right? And I mean, you know, obviously we're still creating a fermented beverage out of grain. That's the same. But most of the way that the business runs is very different. And I know that you've grown a lot. And I know that, you know, moving from, you know, Witch's Hat, where you were, you know, functionally working for somebody else, to having your own place and having those responsibilities, which are manifold and intense, makes, I think, the difference between somebody who really likes beer and becomes a brewer and their opinions about beer, and the difference between somebody who really likes beer, becomes a brewer, and then puts their whole ass on the line to open up a brewery and keep it going. And now you've got more people to support, more responsibilities and community responsibilities and all that stuff. For me, at least, it changed my perspective on craft beer into a way more nuanced perspective. And I wonder how that's affected you, if at all, as you've grown.
Absolutely. Especially opening, like you said, putting your ass on the line, opening a place where, you know, you're responsible for the livelihood of, or your businesses of you know, a handful of people. It's scary. And yeah, it's funny. Yeah. It's interesting how perspective changes, like you had mentioned, working from someone to opening your own. But yeah,
I mean, right down to pointing the finger when you're working for somebody else and you're like, man, why is this guy such an idiot? He could just do this, right?
And now people are saying that about me. So.
Exactly. Yep. All the time, right? I mean, now I've got a staff that is, you know, some 22, 23 full-time folks, sales and production.
Okay.
That doesn't even include the restaurant, which my wife thankfully runs very well, and I don't really have much of anything to do with. And there's, on any given hour of any day, there's somebody going, you know, that guy is kind of an asshole and he really should just do this. You know what I mean? Or why doesn't he know that I'm suffering like this? And then they kind of, you know, suffer in silence or whatever the thing is. And it is, well, your focus does get pulled off of beer a little bit. So those moments when, you know, I'm lucky enough to have, you know, 4 people on the brew house deck and 3 people in the cellar and a bunch of people on the packaging line. And when they are sitting around doing whatever they do at the big picnic table here in the brewery at the end of the day, having a beer, it's so nice to sit down and talk to those folks about beer, right? Absolutely. Because most of what I'm thinking of during the day is payroll and distributor problems and whatever it is. And I don't think about beer as much as I want to. So having that resource of those folks in here where we can just sit, you know, what happened today? How was it? You know, was it, you know, I know you had a slow mash and you had a bad yield on that brew. What was the problem? You know, those are conversations that I really treasure. And it's a bigger, you know, brewery than Old Nation, than Drafting Table. We've been around and whatever, but it's something that I like to talk to brewers about is that, right? Like there's this idea that, you know, Dogfish Head guy, Calagione, right? You know, that it's just kind of this, man, put on sandals and shorts and go walk around the desert and find some cactus that you can make a beer out of, right? No, that's not what I think.
It is not. It was an entertaining show, though.
It sure was. Yeah. It was entertaining. It was, you know, fictional generally.
It's funny you mentioned how little time you get to be thinking about beer because of all the other shit that it takes to run a business. You know, that occupies your time. It's
right.
It's so crazy.
How many folks do you have on staff?
So in the back, it's just I have 2 brewers and / cellarmen / packaging. You know, if they have the day off, I'll fill in or, you know, certain packaging runs. See, I'm brewing less than I'd like to, but that's it's the size we're at right now, the point we're at, and
Yeah, I rarely brew, right? But I also have the opportunity to hire really good brewers and have a kind of a long interview process. And most of the folks, in fact, everybody on the floor at Old Nation right now started on the bottling line. And these are folks that have worked here we don't hire much in the back, right? They just kind of one person, hey man, I got this really killer opportunity in Wyoming and I'm gonna do it, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well go do it, man. You should do that.
Yep.
And then it just kind of moves up. The guy that was on the front of the bottling line goes to the cellar, the cellarman comes up to the brew house, and that's the deal, right?
Yep.
And it's awesome. But I guess what I'm asking here is, and again, we have to be political and polite, and I understand that, but, talk about something like Untapped, right? I don't know if you self-flagellate like I do and go on Untapped and look at reviews of your beer or social media generally.
I try to stay away from it. Yeah.
Good for you. I do stay away from social media now. Every once in a while, I'll go on Untapped and look at it. It doesn't bother me as much anymore, but I will tell you there was a point in my career where, I lost hair going online and listening to people talk about the beer that I was making. And I guess when we're talking about perspectives and perspective shifts, that is part of what I'm talking about, right? Like if you could tell somebody what you think about beer and why you make the beer that you make, right? It's a big question, but what would you say? How would you go about doing that?
I guess I would gravitate back to the traditional, lager styles. To me, and maybe as you mentioned, having it as one of my first beers when I was 14, maybe, if you define beer, that's beer to me.
Right.
Clean, flavorful. I guess I just try not to offend anybody when they ask for the cupcake beer, but I guess in my personal opinion, it's just
what's beer for, right? That's
right. I guess. What do you expect out of beer at that point?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I say this a lot to younger brewers whenever I have an opportunity to talk to them.
Yeah.
Because this was said to me over and over again as a young brewer, particularly in Germany, which was a brewer's first responsibility is to not give someone a hangover they didn't earn, right? So that means care in fermentation. It means care in selection of raw materials. It means learning how to dot your I's and cross your T's before you go inflict your whimsy on an unsuspecting public, right?
Yep.
And then the second one was, and I really believe this one, and it's hard to translate in a lot of contexts in modern American craft beer, but it's possible. Is a good beer is one you can consider and think about if you wish, but don't have to if you don't wish to, right?
Yes.
That it is not the focus of your evening, right? The beer. But it is an accompaniment to whatever it is that you're doing, right? And it should serve that role. And I truly do believe that. And I'm saying that I believe that while I'm brewing and, sending my kids to college probably on some loud ass IPA. But, I do think it's important for young brewers to really think about those two things particularly. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
It's great advice. Yeah, absolutely. Beer gets termed as a social lubricant,
Sure.
And I guess in a way that's saying the same thing. Same thing. Excuse me. It's part. It's accompanying the social situation, or
right.
It's absolutely.
And part of that it totally can include, hey man, what are you drinking? I'm drinking this. So what do you think about it? This is
Sure.
what I think about it. It's what it tastes like. But man, if you're hanging out with somebody, that's about 5 minutes of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe, right, if you're going nuts about it. So I guess, beer's place in culture is important, to me, and I think to a lot of brewers it sounds like it is to you.
Yes.
And as many times as someone might go on Untapped and say, why don't they just put fruit puree in this beer? We do sometimes, right? But I don't like to do that. So we do it once a year. We do it in April. We release the strawberry M43, and everybody gets what they want, and then we can stop and go back to doing what we want to do.
Yep. And we're guilty of it too.
Is there anything that you wanted to chat about or talk about you guys doing now that we didn't get to?
I honestly, I just appreciate you having me on.
Cool. Excellent. So summertime, come grab a beer. Springtime, come grab a beer. Wintertime, come on inside, grab a beer. Sit at the Stammtisch.
Yes.
All right, man. Hey, Aaron, thank you so much. I wish you all the best and great luck moving forward. I appreciate what it is that you're doing for what it's worth. And I hope we talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right. No problem.
Putting your ass on the line, opening a place where, you're responsible for the livelihood of a handful of people. It's scary
to get different perspectives on work, on philosophy toward work, and on the brewing industry specifically. My passion is to make something that is as perfect as I can make it, no matter what it is.
Man, you're super mediocre. Stop being mediocre. You're built to be not mediocre.
So I got back to St. Louis, and we sit in the meeting. I said, okay, guys, what are we going to do with the IPA? And they're like, yeah, we're probably not going to do anything with it.
They weren't drinking beer to get out of their family and to get out of their life and get out of their head.
It was just part of it.
It was part of it. And I think that's what, that was a huge information to me on drinking. And so your first job as a brewer is to not give anyone a hangover they didn't have.